In the heart of the vast maritime empire of Sriwijaya, a king was born into the powerful Sailendra dynasty. His name was Sri Maravijayottunggawarman, a ruler destined to lead his kingdom through one of its greatest challenges. Little is known about his early years, but as a prince of the ruling family, he was raised with the knowledge of governance, diplomacy, and warfare. From a young age, he was taught the importance of Srivijaya's role in the region. The kingdom was more than just a trading hub. It was a center of Buddhist learning, a bridge between great civilizations, and a force that controlled the vital maritime routes connecting India and China. As he grew older, he witnessed firsthand the prosperity that trade brought to his land, but he also saw the growing threats from outside forces. When the time came for him to ascend the throne, Sriwijaya was at its peak, its influence stretching across the seas of Southeast Asia. Merchants, monks, and scholars traveled through its ports, and its rulers maintained strong ties with great kingdoms across Asia. But as he took his place as king, he knew that the peace and prosperity of his empire would not last forever. A storm was brewing on the horizon, and Sriwijaya would soon face one of the greatest challenges in its history. Sri Maravijayottunggawarman ruled over Sriwijaya at a time when the kingdom was at the height of its influence. Sriwijaya was not just a kingdom. It was the center of a vast maritime network that controlled trade routes stretching across Southeast Asia. He understood that his kingdom's strength lay not only in its military power, but also in its ability to maintain political alliances and economic dominance, demanding tribute and offering protection to those who wished to trade within its territories, making the kingdom immensely wealthy. He was also a devout patron of Buddhism, recognizing the spiritual and cultural power that Sriwijaya held in the Buddhist world. The kingdom had been known as a major center of Buddhist learning. The king maintained and expanded monasteries and learning institutions throughout the kingdom. He understood that religion was not just a matter of faith, it was also a powerful tool for diplomacy. One of his most significant diplomatic achievements was his alliance with the Pala Empire of India. This alliance was recorded in the Nalanda inscription, one of the greatest Buddhist universities in history. This act was not merely a gesture of religious devotion. It was a strategic move to strengthen ties with one of the most influential Buddhist states in the world. Buddhist monks from Sriwijaya were welcomed in India. Despite the kingdom's wealth and prestige, Sri Maravijayottunggawarman was aware that Srivijaya's dominance in trade made it a target for ambitious rulers who sought to control the lucrative maritime routes. Strengthening its naval fleet and ensuring that its military was prepared for any potential attacks. However, even the greatest preparations could not fully shield Sriwijaya from the ambitions of its rivals. A new power was rising. The Chola dynasty, the Cholas, had already begun expanding their influence across the Indian Ocean. Their eyes turned towards Sriwijaya, seeing it as both a rival and a prize to be conquered. The year 1025 marked a turning point in Srivijaya's history. For centuries, the kingdom had flourished as the most powerful maritime empire in Southeast Asia, controlling vital trade routes and maintaining strong diplomatic ties across the region. But a storm was approaching, one that would challenge Srivijaya's dominance and shake the foundations of its power. Far to the west, in South India, the Chola Empire had risen under the leadership of Rajendra Chola I. The Cholas were no ordinary kingdom. They were one of the most powerful naval forces of their time, known for their military conquests and expansionist ambitions. Rajendra Chola had already secured his control over much of India, and now he turned his eyes towards Sriwijaya. His goal was clear: to take control of the lucrative trade routes that had made Sriwijaya so wealthy. The Cholas had long been aware of Srivijaya's dominance over Southeast Asian waters. As a trading empire, Sriwijaya demanded tribute from merchants passing through its ports. While this system ensured stability for centuries, it also made the kingdom a prime target for those who sought to bypass its control. Rajendra Chola saw an opportunity. If he could strike at Srivijaya's key trade centers, he could disrupt its economy and gain direct access to the vast riches of the region. This was not a decision made lightly. The Cholas had spent years building a powerful navy, capable of launching swift and devastating attacks across the Indian Ocean. Their ships were designed for both speed and war, allowing them to strike quickly and overpower their enemies before reinforcements could arrive. The invasion was carefully planned, targeting Srivijaya's most important ports and cities. But in Sriwijaya, King Sri Maravijayottunggawarman was unaware of the full scale of the threat. The kingdom had known peace and prosperity for years, and while it maintained a strong naval presence, it had never faced an enemy as aggressive as the Cholas. By the time the warning signs appeared, it was already too late. The attack began with lightning-fast naval raids. The Chola fleet, carrying thousands of soldiers, launched a series of devastating assaults on Srivijayan territories. Key trading cities such as Kedah, Tamberlinga, and Palembang, the very heart of Srivijaya's empire, were targeted first. These cities, which had once been bustling centers of trade and learning, suddenly found themselves under siege. The Chola warriors were ruthless and well-trained. They stormed the coastal settlements, destroying key infrastructures, looting treasuries, and capturing strategic locations. Srivijaya's naval fleet, though powerful, was caught off guard. The Cholas had used advanced naval tactics, striking quickly before Sriwijaya could mount a proper defense. Palembang, the capital of Sriwijaya, became the ultimate prize. The city, known for its grand Buddhist temples and thriving trade centers, was now a battlefield. The Cholas did not just aim to conquer, they wanted to cripple Srivijaya's power. Historical accounts suggest that King Sri Maravijayottunggawarman himself was either captured or forced into exile. Though details remain unclear, the impact of the attack was undeniable. Sriwijaya, the mighty maritime empire, had fallen into disarray. For years, Sriwijaya had relied on its vast network of vassal states and alliances to maintain power. But after the Chola invasion, many of these regional rulers began to break away, realizing that the once mighty Sriwijaya could no longer protect them. The empire that had controlled Southeast Asian waters for centuries was now struggling to maintain its influence. Trade, the lifeblood of Srivijaya's economy, was also severely affected. With its major ports in ruins and its control over the sea weakened, merchants and traders began seeking alternative routes. This shift marked the beginning of Srivijaya's decline, as its economy could no longer sustain the same level of prosperity it once enjoyed. Yet, despite the destruction, the spirit of Sriwijaya was not completely lost. The kingdom's rich Buddhist traditions, its influence on Southeast Asian culture, and its lasting impact on maritime trade continued to endure. But as Sriwijaya struggled to recover, the world around it was changing. New powers were rising, and the age of Srivijaya's absolute dominance was coming to an end. After the Chola invasion, the fate of Sri Maravijayottunggawarman remains uncertain. Some records suggest that he was taken as a prisoner back to India, forced into submission by Rajendra Chola. Others believe he managed to escape, retreating to the outer regions of the empire in an attempt to rebuild what had been lost. There are even accounts that he may have spent his later years in exile, living in a monastery and dedicating himself to spiritual practice. Regardless of his final fate, one thing was clear: Sriwijaya would never be the same again. Though the kingdom continued to exist for some time, it had lost much of its power and influence. With weakened control over trade routes, former vassal states such as Java, Sumatra, and the Malay Peninsula began asserting their independence. The loss of Srivijaya's dominance also paved the way for the rise of new kingdoms. In Java, the kingdom of Kediri and later Majapahit would emerge as dominant forces in the region. Further north, the Khmer Empire and other Southeast Asian states began taking a more active role in trade and politics. Despite its decline, Srivijaya's cultural and religious legacy endured. The kingdom had been a major center of Buddhist learning, and its influence continued to be felt in regions such as Thailand, Cambodia, and Indonesia. The teachings of Srivijayan monks had spread far and wide, shaping the Buddhist traditions of many nations. Even after its fall, Srivijaya's name was remembered in inscriptions, texts, and oral traditions passed down through generations. The fall of Sriwijaya also taught important lessons in history. It showed how even the greatest empires could crumble if they failed to adapt to new threats. The Chola invasion was not just a military defeat, it was a demonstration of how changing trade dynamics and political shifts could bring down even the most prosperous civilizations. Today, remnants of Srivijaya's past can still be found in the scattered ruins of its once grand cities and in the historical texts that tell of its former glory. Sri Maravijayottunggawarman, though lost to time, remains a symbol of a kingdom that once ruled the seas. His reign, though ending in tragedy, is remembered as a crucial chapter in the history of Southeast Asia. After the devastating Chola invasion, Sriwijaya was left in ruins. The once great maritime empire, which had dominated the seas for centuries, was now struggling to hold itself together. Sri Maravijayottunggawarman was no longer in power, and the fate of the royal family was uncertain. Some believed that the king had been captured and taken to India, while others thought he had gone into hiding, attempting to rally what remained of his forces. Regardless of his fate, the reality was clear. Sriwijaya was no longer the dominant power of Southeast Asia, but despite its weakened state, Sriwijaya did not vanish overnight. Local rulers and noble families, determined to preserve what remained of their legacy, worked to rebuild their cities and restore trade networks. The ports of Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, though damaged, still had strategic value. Merchants continued to pass through, though many now had to navigate new political landscapes, as rival kingdoms sought to take control of former Srivijayan territories. One of the biggest challenges faced by Sriwijaya was the loss of its vassal states. Many regions that had once pledged loyalty to Sriwijaya saw the kingdom's weakness as an opportunity for independence. Kingdoms in Java, the Malay Peninsula, and even parts of Sumatra no longer wanted to send tribute to a ruler who could not guarantee their safety. Instead, they began forming their own alliances, further weakening Srivijaya's hold on the region. Meanwhile, the Chola Empire, having achieved its goal of disrupting Srivijaya's trade dominance, did not occupy the region permanently. Their attack had been a demonstration of power, meant to open the seas for Indian merchants rather than establish a new empire. With the Cholas returning to their homeland, Sriwijaya was left to pick up the pieces. The kingdom made several attempts to restore its influence, but it was never able to fully recover. Trade, which had once flowed freely through Srivijayan ports, was now being redirected through new emerging powers, such as the Kingdom of Kediri in Java and the rising Khmer Empire in Cambodia. Srivijaya's former monopoly over the seas was fading, and with it, its ability to dictate the region's economy. Despite these setbacks, Srivijaya's rulers continued to maintain their Buddhist heritage, supporting temples and monasteries as they had done for centuries. They hoped that by reinforcing Srivijaya's role as a spiritual center, they could at least retain some cultural influence, even if their political power had diminished. But the world was changing, and new forces were rising to shape the future of Southeast Asia. By the 13th century, Sriwijaya was a shadow of its former self. The once mighty empire, which had controlled the trade routes between India and China, was now fragmented and vulnerable. The remaining rulers of Sriwijaya attempted to hold on to their power, but rising kingdoms in Java and Sumatra were quickly taking control of the region. One of the final blows to Sriwijaya came from the Kingdom of Singasari, a powerful Javanese state that was expanding its influence. In 1275, King Kertanagara of Singasari launched an expedition known as the Pamalayu Campaign, targeting what was left of Srivijaya's territories in Sumatra. This campaign further weakened Sriwijaya, breaking whatever remained of its political control. By the end of the 13th century, Sriwijaya ceased to exist as a unified kingdom. Its remaining cities either fell under the rule of neighboring states or were abandoned. The once thriving capital of Palembang became a smaller regional center, no longer the powerful hub it had once been. Srivijaya's legacy did not disappear. Even after the fall of the kingdom, its influence could still be seen in the cultures, languages, and traditions of Southeast Asia. The spread of Buddhism in the region, largely influenced by Srivijayan monks and scholars, continued to shape religious practices in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and beyond. In modern times, archaeological discoveries and historical research have helped uncover more about Srivijaya's past. Ancient inscriptions, Chinese records, and temple ruins have provided valuable insights into the kingdom's greatness. Historians now regard Sriwijaya as one of the most important early empires of Southeast Asia, laying the foundation for later kingdoms such as Majapahit and Malacca. Though Sriwijaya may have faded from political power, its spirit remains alive in the history of Indonesia and the broader Southeast Asian region. The rise and fall of this great maritime empire serve as a reminder of how trade, diplomacy, and military strength shaped the course of history. Today, the name Sriwijaya is remembered as a symbol of prosperity, cultural richness, and maritime excellence, a kingdom that once ruled the seas and left an everlasting mark on the world.